Hello everyone, and welcome to the Think in English podcast, where we explore how to improve your English fluency by learning to think in the language. I'm Emma, your co-host, and today we're diving into one of the biggest challenges English learners face: overcoming language barriers. And as always, I'm joined by my fantastic co-host, David.
Hey, Emma. Hey, everyone. It's great to be here again. I think this is such an important topic because language barriers can make anyone feel stuck, no matter how much vocabulary they know or how many grammar rules they've memorized.
Exactly, David. It's not just about learning the language, it's about living the language. We often hear learners say things like, "I freeze when I try to speak English," or, "I understand what people are saying, but I can't reply." Have you experienced this before, David?
Oh, absolutely. I remember when I was learning Spanish. I would spend hours practicing grammar, but the moment I had to speak to a native speaker, my brain just shut down. It's frustrating, right? You feel like all that hard work disappears in an instant.
Definitely. It's a mix of nerves, overthinking, and fear of making mistakes. And honestly, one of the best ways to overcome this is to start thinking in English.
Yes, but let's break that down because thinking in English can sound a bit vague. What does it actually mean to think in English?
Great question. Thinking in English means you stop translating words and phrases from your native language into English. Instead, you train your brain to form thoughts directly in English. For example, instead of thinking, "Donde está el baño?" and then translating it to, "Where is the bathroom?" in your head, you just think, "Where is the bathroom?" automatically.
That's such a good example. And when you get to that point, speaking English becomes so much faster and more natural because you're not wasting time translating every sentence.
Exactly. But it's easier said than done, right? So let's talk about some practical strategies for developing this skill. David, do you have a favorite method for helping learners think in English?
I do, actually. My go-to advice is to start small. Begin with single words or phrases. For instance, when you look at something like a table or chair, try to name it in English in your head. Then, move on to describing simple actions. If you're brushing your teeth, think to yourself, "I'm brushing my teeth." What about you, Emma?
That's a great one. I also recommend using inner monologues. For example, when you're walking to the bus stop, narrate your actions or observations in English. Like, "It's sunny today," or, "I need to catch the 8:30 bus." This helps you practice forming sentences without the pressure of speaking out loud.
Inner monologues are fantastic. They are like mini conversations with yourself, and they prepare you for real conversations later.
Exactly. And here's another tip: surround yourself with English as much as possible. Watch movies, listen to music, or read books in English. The more you immerse yourself in the language, the easier it becomes to think in English.
That's so true. I'd add that learners shouldn't be afraid of making mistakes. Mistakes are part of the learning process. If you're too focused on being perfect, you'll hesitate, and that hesitation blocks your ability to think naturally in English.
Absolutely, David. Mistakes are how we grow. And actually, that brings me to another important point: confidence. Building confidence is key to overcoming language barriers.
100%. Confidence doesn't mean you won't make mistakes. It means you're okay with making them. It's about having the courage to try, even if your English isn't perfect.
Right. And one way to build that confidence is to practice speaking as much as you can, even if it's just with yourself. For example, try recording yourself speaking in English. Listen to the recording, notice areas for improvement, and try again.
That's a great idea. It's also helpful to find a language partner or join a conversation group. Speaking with others pushes you out of your comfort zone and forces you to think in English.
Yes, and if you don't have a partner, you can even use AI tools or apps to simulate conversations. There are so many resources available now to help learners practice speaking.
Speaking of resources, I think we should also talk about how learners can improve their listening skills. After all, understanding what others are saying is just as important as expressing yourself.
Totally. Improving your listening skills helps you respond more naturally in conversations, which is a big part of thinking in English. So, David, what's your top tip for better listening?
My top tip is to listen actively. Don't just hear the words. Try to understand the meaning behind them. For example, when you watch a TV show or listen to a podcast, focus on how words are used in context. Pay attention to intonation, tone, and common phrases.
That's a great point. And I'd add that learners shouldn't be afraid to pause and replay audio if they miss something. Repetition helps you catch details you might have missed the first time.
Absolutely. And don't forget to practice listening to different accents. English is spoken in so many ways around the world. British, American, Australian, Indian. Exposure to various accents helps you become a more versatile listener.
Yes, that's so important. And it also builds your confidence because you're less likely to feel lost when you encounter an unfamiliar accent.
Exactly. Now, Emma, I think we should address the elephant in the room: fear. Fear of speaking, fear of sounding silly, fear of being judged. It's something so many learners struggle with.
You're right, David. Fear can be a huge obstacle. But here's the thing, most people aren't judging you as harshly as you think they are. In fact, many native speakers are impressed when someone is learning their language.
That's so true. I think learners need to remind themselves that communication is a goal, not perfection. If you can get your message across, you're succeeding.
Exactly. And here's a little mindset shift that helps. Instead of thinking, what if I make a mistake? Think, what if I learn something new?
I love that. It's all about reframing the situation. And honestly, mistakes often lead to the most memorable lessons.
Absolutely. Now, before we wrap up, let's summarize the key points we've discussed today.
Sure. First, we talked about what it means to think in English and why it's important for fluency.
Then, we shared practical strategies, like starting with small phrases, using inner monologues, and surrounding yourself with English.
We also discussed the importance of building confidence, embracing mistakes, and practicing listening skills.
And finally, we talked about overcoming fear by focusing on communication instead of perfection.
Wow, we covered a lot. Hopefully, our listeners feel inspired and ready to tackle their language barriers.
I hope so too. And remember, thinking in English is a journey. It won't happen overnight, but with consistent practice and the right mindset, you'll get there.
Absolutely. Well, that's all for today's episode of Think in English. Thanks for joining us, and don't forget to subscribe and share this podcast with anyone who's learning English.
And if you have questions or topics you'd like us to cover, send us a message. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep practicing and keep thinking in English. Bye for now.
Bye, everyone.